Good morning, it's 9 o'clock. I'd like to call the public hearing for the Region of Queens Municipality to amend an existing development agreement with Wasawek Limited to allow for self-storage business on property identified as PID number 70218896 and located at 85 Hillside Road in Brooklyn. It's Tuesday, June 8th, 2021. The purpose of this public hearing is to provide any interested person an opportunity to present an oral or written presentation to Council of Region of Queens Municipality with regard to its intention to amend an existing development agreement with Wasawek Limited dated October 29th, 1999 to allow for self-storage business on property identified as PID number 70218896 and located at 85 Hillside Road in Brooklyn. The procedure for this public hearing is as follows. Opening remarks. Every person is eligible to speak, but first must be recognized by the chair and must give his or her name and address before commencing. A person may speak more than once, but preference will be given to those who have not previously spoken. This meeting will be conducted following parliamentary procedure. This council uses its own rules of order as well as Borneo's rules of order. The floor is now open. Mike, would you, as planning director, give us the background information on this development agreement?
Sure, Mayor Norman. Yes, the Region of Queens has received an application to allow for self-storage business at the property located at 85 Hillside Road in Brooklyn. The property is currently zoned as general residential R2 under the region's land use bylaw. The property and the property owners are currently using this property and the building for a small scale manufacturing business where they produce Christmas tree rings and some novelty items. This use is not permitted in the R2 zone, but it is allowed through a development agreement which was entered into back in 1999. So the self-storage business being proposed does not comply with the permitted uses within the general residential zone. But the existing development agreement does contain provision whereby council can consider amendments to that agreement. So you'll recall back in early 2021, council approved amendments to the municipal planning strategy and land use bylaw, whereby it incorporated a policy to allow council to consider the self-storage uses in the R2 zone by development agreement process. So amending the existing development agreement would be in line with the current policy of the municipal planning strategy. So it is something that council has the ability to consider. So the area 85 Hillside Road is primarily low density residential development. The lot is a reasonable size for this area at an acre in size. And the building itself is about 4,900 square feet in area. So it's a decent sized building. So it is the intent of the applicants that the self-storage business be located entirely within the existing building. So a couple of options for council to consider. One is maintaining the status quo, whereby essentially would deny the amendment request, or second option would be to amend the existing development agreement to allow as an additional use self-storage businesses within the current development agreement. So both staff and planning advisory committee have reviewed the application and feel that it is a reasonable request, and there's sufficient provision within the development agreement to reduce potential impacts with the surrounding residential neighborhood. So that's it.
Thank you. Are there any comments from those who are attending? Shannon, do you wish to make any comments? Are there any comments? Hearing none, I adjourn the meeting. I would now like to call the regular council meeting Tuesday, June 8th to order. Before I call for changes or approval to the agenda, I would like to make a few comments. The discovery of the remains of 215 children at the Kamloops Indian Residential School is a devastating and stark reminder of the nature of the Indigenous treatment in Canada. It is shocking that so many Canadians profess to be unaware of the past practices of the residential school system. This is shocking because for decades, there have been documentaries, books, articles, statements, apologies, and oral histories about the residential school treat system. The Canadian conversation about residential schools and Indigenous treatment is a disconnected one. Many of us are taught that it's all in the past. That's not the case. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1996. The Shubenacadie Residential School in Nova Scotia closed in 1968. That is in many of our lifetimes. And the discovery of those 215 children reaffirms that this history is not history. It is today. We need to look at today and not hide things in the past. It is up to us to listen and learn. As time passes, more atrocities of the past will be discovered. Don't wait for those discoveries to learn about them. I encourage you to learn more now. Take time to learn about the Canada that includes residential schools, the 60 Scoop, treaties, environmental racism, relocation programs, unclean drinking water, imbalanced incarceration rates, missing and murdered Indigenous women and children, and international trauma. Listen, learn, act, and change. I invite everyone to please join me in a minute of silence to honor the 215 children lost.
My apologies, it's Shannon from Moswick. We're having technical problems here. Did we miss anything? Sorry.
Thank you. Shannon, we concluded the public hearing with no comments from the gallery, but the council meeting is beginning. There is a place for public question comment session. So if you would like to make comments regarding the development agreement for self-storage, you may do so at that time. Is that okay with you?
Sure.
Okay. So changes or approval to the agenda. Are there any changes or approval to the agenda as presented? Hearing none, I will ask for a motion to accept the agenda as presented.
So
Moved by David, Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Gidney. All those in favor? Carried. There are no. Thanks, Kevin. Deputy Muse. There are no presentations. Does anyone have any petitions to table? Public question comment session. Shannon, would you like to speak at this time? If so, you need to identify yourself with your name and your civic address. That would be your personal civic address.
My name is Shannon Jollymore. I live at 660 Highway 8 Milton. I'm with Wazawick. We're at 85 Hillside Road, Brooklyn. We're really interested in doing the self-storage. Like we said, everything would be contained within the building. There wouldn't be any access without someone here, and it would be within our business hours. Unless outside the hours, we'd only run until 10, and that would be by appointment only. And we're really looking at getting this started.
Thank you very much, Shannon.
Thank
Is
you.
there- Thank you. Yes, Leon.
Excuse me, John Robertson, College Street in Liverpool. Yes, I have a few comments. First of all, your comments at the beginning of the session today was very appropriate. Thank you. In the agenda, under 9.0, you have two policies that are being presented today for approval. One with respectful workplace, the other human rights and harassment. The policies are very comprehensive. I've read through them, and the end result could be, if it was serious enough, termination of employment. Now, I noticed apparently one thing that brought this on, it's mentioned in the preamble there. There have been a number of complaints in the past in these areas, but there's no real mechanism to take the action. Good to see that these policies are going to be hopefully approved today. Another one is 10.2, flood risk there, the application for upgrading Market Street from the bridge to Water Street, as I understand it, that we're building it up there. My question is there, I know I was involved, or not involved, but I was listening to the CDCL report that was presented back, I believe, in 2019 with the whole area being flooding problems. And I noticed that here, if they build up there, which I understand they would be doing if this application is approved in that area, would this cause more of a flooding problem in the parking lot? Because we have a problem there now.
That is a question that can be asked of our director, who is at the time the matter is brought to the floor.
Okay, and also it mentioned in there about bringing the CDCL, I believe, report, putting it on the website and making it public. Well, it was public at the time, as I remember back then, but it probably wasn't put on the website. One last thing, I noticed under 11.1, you are changing your banking services from the Royal Bank to the Bank of Montreal. And it's indicated in there that this will increase the revenues considerably for the region of Queens. Is that correct?
That is what we have been told, yes.
Okay, well, thank you very much for allowing me to speak.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak? If not, we'll ask for approval of the minutes, the regular council minutes approval of May 25th, 2021. Moved by Councillor Charlton and seconded by Councillor Fancy. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Passed. Thanks, Deputy Muse. 7.0, dangerous and unsightly premises, nothing to report. Economic development, nothing to report regarding motions at this time. Corporate services, 9.1. Policy 90, respectful workplace. There is a recommendation in the package. If someone would make that recommendation so we can get the matter on the floor. Councillor Romero.
I move the Council of Region of Queens Municipality approve policy 90, respectful workplace.
Seconded by Councillor Charlton. I'll ask CAO McNeil to explain this policy, but with it, you will note that it will cause the repeal of the policy 25, sexual harassment, as that would now be covered within this appeal. CAO McNeil.
Mayor Norman and Council, this policy is a reflection of a need and a request from over a period of time from staff and also from some members of council over a period of time, asking that we update our policies. And as it was earlier noted, there have been complaints in the past, but because there's no formal policy, there's no real clear rules and regulations as to what's acceptable behavior, not acceptable behavior. People have felt like they couldn't bring forward any type of concerns because there wasn't a process to deal with them. So the process clearly outlines what is respectful and what is disrespectful behavior. And it provides examples in the policy as well, just to clarify, which is a helpful tool, I believe. And then there is a accountability, which essentially says every member of staff and council and community members on public committees are responsible for their own actions, their own words. And we're also responsible to ensure that our workplace is respectful and safe. And we have a duty to ensure that even if it's not ourselves, that other people follow the rules and are respectful as well. So there is a process. There's both an informal process in the policy, and then there's a formal process. So if the issue can be dealt with informally, that's the first step. If the respondent feels, or the complainant feels like they can deal with it informally, there is a process to do that. But if they do not feel or comfortable doing that, or if that does not lead to resolution, then there is a formal process to follow as well, which is a documented written report, investigation takes place, and then decision is made as to what the recommendation of the outcome should be. And recognizing that we do have collective agreements and other things that where they do conflict, that the collective agreement takes precedence over this policy. Otherwise, all parts of the policy continue in force.
Thank you, CAO McNeil. Are there any questions or comments from council? Councillor Gidney.
I've read the policy over. I'm a little confused about some items on it. What I would like to do, I'd like to move that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality table the motion to approve policy 90, respectful workplace, to June 22nd, 21 council meeting, as additional time to review and process the policy is required for me.
Is there a seconder for that motion? Seconded by Council
Sorry.
Fancy. So it's not a matter of discussion to table a motion, but you will need a, believe, CAO McNeil, 3/4 majority of council.
No, that's not the case.
That's not the case.
No, and I think Councillor Gidney is actually asking to defer the matter rather than table the matter.
So do you need a motion to defer?
Yes, same process, majority.
Majority rule.
Yes.
So are there those, so I'm going to ask those who wish to defer the motion, signify by raising their hand.
Yes.
Against? Motion to defer is carried. Nine point two is a policy, a new policy, human rights and harassment, policy 91. There is a motion in the package. If someone would so make that, would be interested, would so make that motion. Councillor Hawks.
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality approve policy 91, human rights and harassment.
Seconded by Councillor Amaro. CAO McNeil, would you provide us background information on this policy?
This is a companion policy to the previous one, policy 90. which is respectful workplace. This is human rights and harassment. This deals specifically with those items that are covered under the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act, which are contained in the policy, which is under the definition section, which defines what harassment is and defines what the prohibited grounds are. So those items that are listed are directly out of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act. And so this simply says, if a member of staff, council, or public committee member feels like there has been a contravention of any of these aspects of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Act, then they have an informal process they can use to try to find resolution. And if they can't find resolution through an informal process, then there's a formal process for them to proceed with, to file a complaint and have an adjudication carried out based on the policy.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from council? Councillor Gidney.
Again, I find the same situation with this, and I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality defer the motion to approve policy 91, human rights and harassment, to the June 22nd, 21 council meeting, as additional time to review and process the policy is required.
Seconded by Councillor Charlton. Deputy Mayor Muse, can you take the chair for a moment?
Yes.
I'd just like to speak about the matters to defer. As council people, we received this information last week. I believe it's very straightforward and very specific. And it's, as CAO McNeil referenced, there have been complaints, conversations over the years respecting the needs for these policies. As many of you are aware, up until this point in time, council have never been involved in these policies, and that has created issues in the past. So, and I realize because this is a companion policy, it goes hand in hand with the first policy. But I really ask that we really listen, read, and understand and ask our questions prior to, so that these matters do not get deferred. However, that is my comment. So Deputy Mayor Muse, if you'd finish off this section 9.2, please.
Okay, you'll have to tell me if anybody else has anything to say about the defer motion. Anybody else that has anything to say?
Councillor Fancy has his hand up.
Yes,
Nancy?
okay, Councillor Musi. The only other thing I have to say about is that when we get these things, we're getting them on Thursday, and sometimes, you know, it can be, if you feel comfortable about it, you should vote for it. But if you're uncomfortable in any way, deferring isn't a bad thing. To make sure that when we do it right. So if there's, you don't want to be looking at it a year or two down the road and say, man, I wish I would have noticed that or whatever. So if anyone feels uncomfortable, they should be able to defer and be able to say, we're not doing anything wrong by doing that. So you don't want to feel like you're under the scope for doing that. So I think that's wise if you feel uncomfortable in any way. And that's what the voting process is for.
Councillor Fancy. Anyone else have anything to say? We defer motion.
Councillor Brown has his hand up.
Brown?
Sorry, I just disappeared there for a second. I think this is a good policy. I think the reason some of us wanted to defer it was there was a few pieces of language in there that were a little bit confusing. And I think having the extra 2 weeks to talk it over and get some clarity will help out with this. I think it's a good policy all in all, and I think the council should be held accountable for any of these. You know, I don't think any of us are, I'm speaking for myself, I don't think I'm looking forward to deferring it because I don't think we should be held accountable. I think we should be, but I think some of us would like a little more clarity on some of the wording in it. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Councillor Brown. Anyone else have anything on the deferred motion?
No, it looks like you're good to go, Deputy Muse.
Okay. All those in favor of the motion? Yes.
Aye.
So this is, I can't see, so Darlene, Mayor.
Yes, it was.
Did it
Yeah.
pass?
Yes, it did.
Okay.
And for our
Thank you,
listeners, Deputy Councillor Muse is on a call-in, hence my assistance with him. 10.2, there is a motion in the package. If someone would make a recommendation for that motion, please. Councillor Carlton.
It'll be 10.1 though that we're doing, right? Not 10.2.
10.1.
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality authorize the submission of an application to Nova Scotia Department of Municipal Affairs Provincial Capital Assistance Program for 50% funding of a new bulk water station.
Seconded by Councillor Brown. Before I ask Adam to speak about this, and I believe it'll be Adam. C.A. McNeil, is that correct? We currently allow free access to treated water in bulk. And this is not referring to the water well that we all know on the west side where people go and fill up their small quantities of water. This deals with the ability for us to charge large bulk users of treated water who are currently using treated water free, which the water utility currently is paying for. So the water utility users of the town of Liverpool pay for the water utility. And there's currently large uses of that water for a variety of uses being used. So the idea is much like haulers can dump sewer with a card, we will be able to do the same for bulk users of treated water off of the water treatment plant. Adam or CEO McNeil, which of you will comment on this?
Yeah, I can comment if there's any questions, I guess. So typically what we see is that there's a few users in.
Adam, can you speak up a little louder?
Yeah, I'll have to yell.
That's fine.
We have a few users right now who have kind of a ad hoc standing opportunity to receive bulk water when they need it for pressure washing or for pour washroom washing or those kind of services. So we do give away a considerable quantity to private industry for their exclusive use. And this is pretty non-typical availability for any utility to offer that service. So we're looking to provide a program in place, or provide the service where we can charge back to the utility what they're entitled to for revenue.
Thank you. Are there any questions of Director of Engineering Grant? Councillor Gidney.
Adam, has any other location been considered besides the one on Hennessy Drive, Henry Hennessy Drive?
Yeah, so we looked at a few of them, and that site was selected based on the existing infrastructure, really minimize the cost. Other utilities I know have spent upwards of $200,000 installing a similar system because they had to start from the street and build in with a new structure to house the equipment to keep it frost free and that kind of stuff. So by utilizing an existing building and having the opportunity right there, it's pretty substantial savings.
Good, thank you.
Any other questions of Director Grant? Councillor Charlton.
So in reading this, it says the projected revenue could be somewhere between 15,000 and 28,000, depending on the rate structure. But it goes on to say that not all revenue is profit, as there are increased operating expenses, but providing this service. What are the expected operating expenses for this, so we understand what the scope, like what this would look overall?
So it's kind of twofold. In some capacity now, we'll be able to offer bulk water to other users that we've never offered to in the past that have been looking for this service to sell. There's contractors around that want to fill swimming pools, but they don't have the opportunity to buy it in Liverpool to buy the water. So they travel to town of Bridgewater or Shelburne or somewhere else to get it. So that's part of it. So we could see increased water consumed in that method. The other part of it would be just the production in general is going to, it costs money to make the water. So we're going to see increased expenses in that area.
But we really have no idea what that looks like. Is that what you're saying?
We don't have an exact idea of what the quantity is. We have some ballpark estimates based off what we know people are using right now. And that, I guess, projected forward is kind of how we got to where we're at with what we expect for revenues.
Any other questions? Councillor Fancy?
Yes, Adam, is there any concern, especially I think we're going to have a dry summer? Is that any concern of lake levels and things like that?
I don't believe so. And if that's a situation we get into, we can certainly cross that. And we have the opportunity under our permit to operate to cease any activities of that nature. But we have ample capacity right now in our lake, certainly what we've seen over the previous years, to offer this service.
Councillor Brown, you had your hand up.
Yes. Adam, will this come into effect and charge money to the fire departments who sometimes fill the trucks up to fill people's wells or cisterns, like for any water they use that's outside of the emergency usage?
It would, absolutely, yes. So any non-emergent use would be a charge that would be due to the utility.
Okay.
Councillor Romero?
Are these prices in line with other areas?
And that's something we're examining right now under the water rate study, and it's a perfect opportunity to go through it. So what we've looked at is what other utilities offer, and that's how we got that range of costs. So some of them are based on how many contractors use it and the quantities that they sell, and they offer a minimum charge or an annual charge, and then plus the bulk quantity charge as well. So there's variety, and we're waiting for our contractor that's doing our water rate study to come meet with us and discuss that in further detail.
So these may change, or would they?
They may, absolutely, yeah. And that's kind of just middle of the road, what I got on the report for right now.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone wish to speak prior to Councillor Charlton, who's already spoken? Councillor Hawks? No. Councillor Charlton?
So in this, it says that this 50% of our money could come from gas tax. So would this money not be spent until next year, or where do we project this happening if this project is approved?
We don't expect this project to fall in this budget year right now.
Okay. And the other question I had in reference to Ralph about could this be located anywhere else? What kind of like traffic or congestion could this create? Would that be a concern for traffic surrounding the fire hall at this time?
I don't foresee any issues. So right now where we're proposing to put it on the side of the building may eliminate one parking spot, but right now it's a door that was utilized, or the area I guess was utilized by Public Works when we were over there. So the door isn't used regularly and it's hatched out in yellow. So it's not available for parking at any time anyhow. So it's a good opportunity right there to not impede on any other parking spots.
Okay.
Any further questions or comments before I ask for the question? If not, I will ask for the question. All those in favor signify by raising your hand.
Yes.
Thank you, Councillor Muse. Against? Councillor Charlton, did you do either?
I voted in favor.
Okay, I didn't see your hand's not in the vision. Passed. 10.2, Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program, which is a FRIF application. There is a recommendation in the package. If someone would make that recommendation, Councillor Brown.
Recommend that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality authorize the submission of an application to Nova Scotia Department of Municipal Affairs Flood Risk Infrastructure Investment Program for 50% funding for flood mitigation measures required on Market Street, Liverpool.
And seconded by Councillor Hawks. Adam, before you begin, please note that this would be a budgeted item for 22-23 budget year. And it's basically the raising of Market Street to allow for emergency traffic and all other traffic during flood situations. So Adam, a bit of background, please.
So background of this would be.
You have to yell. You have to yell again.
I'm losing my voice. We had CBCL provide us with a study of the waterfront and identify the issues at hand for parking lot flooding. And one of the results that come out of that was identified was how vulnerable Market Street is, both as an arterial link for emergency services and for residents of Liverpool, Milton, Brooklyn, that area. So we've identified, I guess, as the first step in resolving some of the issues down there would be to make Market Street more sound when it comes to flooding in that area. And this project would be a start to that.
Questions of the Rector grant. Councillor Charlton.
In reference to Leon's comment, could this create flooding for the like with the runoff of the road for the existing buildings, such as like BMO, where social opportunities are? Could we foresee this rectifying that the road is accessible during flooding for emergency services, but will create other problems for the buildings that are there?
The project proposed won't create any further benefits or risks to those properties. It will only benefit the street and the motorists using the street. Yeah, hopefully, does that answer your question?
I realized in the document that it wouldn't do anything to give protection to those buildings, but I just wanted to ask and ensure that we don't foresee it creating more issues for them than what they currently are experiencing.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, we don't foresee any difficulty with creating further hazards. Bear in mind, sea level rise is a real thing. It's going to continue to happen and we can't stop it. So as levels rise and storms get worse and that nature of stuff, we'll get the street up in dry ground, but the buildings will continue to remain where they're at and we can't prevent that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Other questions or comments?
May I make a comment, Mayor Norman?
Yes, Siomika.
Just further to that, as Director Grant has said, sea level rise is continuing. And so I just wouldn't want someone to believe that the work that we're proposing to undertake here, if there is continued or worsening flooding on the waterfront, to believe that we're the cause of it, because it's probably going to be most likely that the continuing sea level rise and the other aspects of climate change are actually contributing to or causing the increased flooding, and not the work that we're carrying out, because that will be the first complaint will be, well, that it never flooded that bad before we fixed the road. But just because we fixed the road doesn't necessarily give a causal relationship, but that's why the increased flooding, we're pretty confident that it's going to be caused directly from the increase in high tides and things like that.
Thank you. And I believe once the CBCL document is released and it clearly indicates and predicts increased flooding with maps and other things, it will serve to make people aware of what's going to happen in that area. Councillor Mero, you had your hand up.
And Adam, how far past the bridge will this go?
So the project as proposed would start on the Town Bridge abutment on the south side. The bridge is at an elevation right now that is suitable for projected the next 80 years based on current models, and it would take us from that abutment up Market Street, sorry, just above water, pretty close to where the entrance to the dry cleaner used to be, that vacant lot there. So in and around that area, but how it all blends out into the neighboring streets and street areas yet to be determined.
Thank you.
Any other questions or comments of Director Grant? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Moves us on to 11.1, an RFP for banking services, a recommendation made in your package. Someone would so make that motion. Councillor Romero.
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality contract the municipality's banking services with the Bank of Montreal for the next 2 years with an option to renew in each of the subsequent 3 years.
Seconded by Councillor Gidney. Director Corporate Services, Vino, would you like to give us some background information on this, please?
Sure, Mayor Norman. I think the process was pretty transparent. We had 4 banks submit their proposals. We evaluated them. Step 1 was done anonymously. And then when we got our top 2 finalists, I sent out the complete RFPs from both of the finalist banks, and then everybody submitted their scores to me. And all the members of the Audit and Internal Control Committee placed the same bank at the top. So the decision was fairly easy for us that way as staff. I think that the potential revenue here is significant because we can make better decisions. Just to give you guys some scope, our interest revenue last year, not the year that ended March 2021, but the year that ended March 2020, in the special operating reserve alone was $286,000. Last year, March 2021 was $94,900. So that's a significant loss of interest revenue. And that is because of the interest rates dropping in the economy as a whole. That's something that we have no control over. So what we have to do is we have to take back as much control as we can by looking at opportunities to invest this money and making sure that our deposits get the maximum amount of interest that they can. And this proposal was very lucrative in that way. And also the bank fees were 99.9% waived. So that's $14,000 a year. So I'm really happy with the decision, and I hope that council takes the recommendation.
Thank you, Director Vino. Any questions of our Director of Corporate Services? Councillor Fancy?
Yeah, I just want to make one comment. I think she's done a terrific job with this. I mean, you see you've gone from 280 or something like that down to 90. You know, we've lost 2 to 3 cents on the tax rate, and anything that you can recoup, even just with the $14,000 in fees. I mean, that's fantastic for maybe it's something, again, it's always hindsight 2020 looking back, but it's a good way to go forward in the future. I appreciate that.
Thank you for those positive comments, Councillor Fancy. Councillor Gidney?
Yeah, I agree. I think Joanna's did an incredible job with this, and hats off. We need this. We need every penny that we can get. And I hate to be a penny pincher, but at these times we have to be. Good job. Thank you.
I'm going to ask for the question. All those in favor of the recommendation of the motion, please signify by raising your hand. Opposed?
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Muse. Carried. 12.1, Community Investment Fund. A recommendation for a motion. Who would like to make that? Councillor Charlton?
I move that Sorry, Mayor Norman, are we doing both of these or one at a time?
They are two
They will need to be done separately.
separately.
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality provide grant funding to Queens County Museum in the amount of $5,000 from the 2021-2022 Community Investment Fund.
Seconded by Councillor Gidney. Community Development Coordinator Henley, you are here to make your comments on this matter.
Sure. Queens County Museum applied for funding, operational funding again this year. Their request originally was for $8,000. Unfortunately, underneath policy, they don't qualify for $8,000 because they do not own or have a long-term lease for the facility. It's currently owned by the province of Nova Scotia. So they qualify for the next level down, which would be up to $5,000. So that is why the recommendation is for $5,000.
Thank you. Any questions of Community Development Coordinator Henley? Hearing none, I'm going to ask for the question. All those in favor signify by raising your hand. Opposed?
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Muse. Carried. There is a second recommendation under 12.1 of someone, Councillor Brown.
I move that the Council of the Region of Queens Municipality provide grant funding to Big Brothers Big Sisters of South Shore in the amount of $375 from the 2021-2022 Community Investment Fund.
And that is seconded by Councillor Charlton. And again, Community Development Coordinator Henley, you have a big title. Give us the background information because this is significantly less than what they requested. So perhaps you can explain, even though it's in here, your reasoning for those in our viewing audience. Would you explain the decision?
Sure. So Big Brothers Big Sisters of South Shore requested $1,500 in operational funding. Their recommendation is for $375. In our policy, it states that if a organization has more than a 50% surplus for the previous 2 years, that they're not eligible for funding. So when I reviewed their financial information that they submitted with their application, last year's budget for 2020, they were over the 50%. However, for the 2019 budget year, they were just under the 50%. So they are still eligible under policy for funding. So what we did is I went on the same reasoning that I went with previous applications, and because they were very close, they were within 5% of the 50% surplus. So we reduced the ask, or sorry, we reduced the amount being recommended for funding.
Questions of Community Development Coordinator Henley? Any questions or comments? If not, I'm going to ask for the question on the motion. All those in favor? Opposed?
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Muse. Carried. And we do have item 13.1, self-storage. We've conducted the public hearing. The matter had been posted. There is a recommendation in the package. Councillor Amaro, whose district this would fall in. So you have your hand raised. You would like to make the motion.
I would. This is a long time coming.
It is going to be-
I move that the Council of Region of Queens Municipality adopt an administrative policy respecting amendments to an existing development agreement with Wassawek Limited dated October 29th, 1999, to allow for a self-storage business on property identified as PID number 70218896 and located at 85 Hillside Road in Brooklyn.
Seconded by Councillor Fancy. Any questions or comments? Past council dealt with this through PAC. We picked it up where they left off. It's a long and tedious planning process. However, it's here. Michael, if this passes, when would they be able to begin any operational things they would need to do?
I guess, Councillor Norman, as per the Municipal Government Act, we're required to place a notice of passing in the local paper, which would go in on June the 16th, whereby it sets out a 14-day appeal period. So if there's any persons that don't agree with the decision of council, can appeal that decision to the Utility and Review Board. So I guess all things going good, I guess potentially the development agreement amendment could be finalized the first part of July. And I guess to complete that process, and if there's nobody appealing the decision of council, the amending policy gets recorded at the Registry of Deeds, just like the original development agreement. And when that amendment gets recorded, then they can basically start their business. So I anticipate early in July, barring any appeals.
Thank you. And I would be very surprised, considering the amount of public hearings and changes that we have made to this, that there would be any. However, we do have to follow the rules of the Municipal Government Act as dictated by the provincial government. So if this motion passes, hopefully Wasuwek can get the go-ahead within the beginning of July. So are there any other comments or questions? Hearing that, I'm going to ask for the question. All those in favor?
Yes.
Thank you, Deputy Muse. Against? And that is passed. Congratulations, Shannon. Just another month. It's a long process.
Thank you very much.
And that is the end of our public portion of the agenda. I would ask for a motion to move in camera. We have two items: lease of municipal property and contract negotiations. So if I have a motion to move in camera, moved by Councillor Gidney, seconded by Councillor Brown, that we move in camera. All those in favor, pass that we move in camera. And that will be the end of this Zoom session. Everyone received the numbers for conference call phone in, and for our viewing audience who is viewing this recording, we do not do in camera via Zoom because of public security, and we all counselors and call-ins do so from a landline. So that is the end of the public question period, and we'll hear you all on conference call. Everyone has their numbers, yes? Okay, so we'll just move right to there as soon as we can call in. That's it.